topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hi, I'm Shelby Wagner, and I welcome you to my show, Learning to Dance in the Rain. This is where my guests and I share overcoming stories of our experiences to help you avoid some of the pitfalls and mistakes that we made, and to present new information that we think people need to know. I am I'm an award-winning author of 2 books and talk about grieving and loss and self-improvement and trying to figure out what we want to do after we've lost a loved one, and then dating after 50, and then romance scams. And today we're going to be talking a bit about romance scams again. And my guest is head of the operations of the Cyber Helpline. She's been a key member of the leadership team since its inception. She holds a first-class honors degree in policing and criminal justice, wow, and a master's in cybercrime investigations. Charlotte has conducted numerous cybercrime training sessions, both in the UK and internationally, serving police forces, stalking and harassment victims, and private organizations. Wow, I'm very impressed with Charlotte here, and I'm very happy to meet you. Come on out, Charlotte, and let's have a talk.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
How are you?
I'm really good. How are you?
I'm very good too, and I'm glad to have you here. And you just told me a little bit before that you spend half a year in the United States and half of the year in the UK.
Yeah, and it is permanent jet lag all the time.
I just wondered or asked you if you ever woke up and wondered where you were at.
Yeah, it's the story of my life.
Right. So, will you tell us a bit more about yourself and what is the Cyber Helpline that you are working so hard on?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Charlotte. I'm head of operations at the Cyber Helpline and have been with the charity for 6, nearly 7 years now. So it's been a long time. We started in the UK all that time ago, and it really came from the idea of how do we ensure that victims of cybercrime have somewhere they can turn to for the technical advice? Because there's so much support out there for the emotional help. There were some great initiatives in the UK around that emotional support and talking people through the criminal justice journey. But there was a barrier between getting justice and getting emotional help and actually understanding what technically happened to you. And understanding what you can do from a cybersecurity point of view to gather evidence, to recover your accounts and devices and feel safe online again. So we're essentially a movement from the cybersecurity community to bring support to victims of cybercrime. We are completely free in the UK and the USA, and we've supported over 800,000 people since we started 6 years ago. So it's been a very interesting journey.
And did you must have started this in the UK, correct?
Yeah, it all started in the UK, and we've been in the US for just over a year now.
So what exactly is romance fraud or romance scam? Can you talk about it a little
For
bit?
sure. It comes from so many different kind of types of angles. I think that the common way that people know of it is somebody pretending to be someone they're not online, often disguising themselves as somebody in a position of authority. So that could be somebody that works for the military or some way that you would tend to trust them. And they will start building a relationship up with somebody online, whether that be through social media, through dating websites, whatever that might be. And it can really change kind of how long these types of take. We've seen ones that have lasted for years before they've asked for money, and equally we've seen ones where they've asked for money within a day. But there will be a point where once they think that they've gained enough trust with you, they will begin to ask for funds. And that could be through information they found out about you. They could find that you really like pets and animals. So they might say, I need to pay my dog's vet bill. Can you transfer me some money? It might just be a really traumatic story and they say they need to pay hospital bills. But actually, once you've sent that money over, either they'll disappear or they'll continue to ask for money. And it gets into a vicious cycle. But the key part of romance scams are somebody trying to gain trust in a person to then further exploit them.
So you have, if I call the helpline, what could I expect to happen?
Yeah, so I think for romance scams in particular, a lot of the people that are contacting us are suspicious that something's happening, but they aren't really sure yet. This is somebody they might have been speaking to, like I said, for months, years. It might be someone they've built a relationship with over the course of a few days, even. But there's still often a doubt in their mind of whether this is somebody that they should trust or shouldn't, but if something has flagged to them that something's not right, whether they've sent money over or not at this stage. So when they get in touch with us, they will speak to one of our helpline responders who are volunteers from across the cybersecurity industry. They will talk them through the issue, whether that be over email or phone, and just help them to understand what's happened to them. And I think that's a really key part to start with of how has this taken place? Why has this kind of happened to you in particular, or why, and trying to help people come out of that stage of often feeling stupid for what's happened, which shouldn't be the case. Scammers are expert marketers by trade. They wouldn't be able to take money from people if they weren't. So it can happen to anybody, and just really helping them to understand that before we then move into the later stages of things like helping them report to the police to gather evidence, and make sure that law enforcement take it seriously. And helping to advocate for them as well. And then towards kind of the closing stages of their case, once they're in a position where the crime has been reported, it might be things like helping them to look at their security online, making sure that they can't be contacted by people they don't want to contact them, making sure that everything is locked down and that their online footprint is really secure and that they have ownership of it, that everything out there is things that they want to be out there rather than stuff they've accidentally shared.
In my book, well, this happened to me, and that's why I wrote my book, Learning to Dance in the Rain. That was in 17 when that happened to me, 2017. So at that time, could I have, if I had doubts in my head, could I have called the Cyber Helpline and to find out if you thought this was a scam or if you thought this might be real?
Yeah, totally. And that's one of the things we're really passionate about, is that our service is open to everyone, whether they know that they're experiencing a cybercrime or whether they think maybe something's not right. They can get in touch and just ask us our opinion, say, what would you do? And do you think this is right? And we can kind of go through those questions. And I mean, the chances are most of the time, if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. But obviously we can try and provide that reassurance for both people that are experiencing a crime, but also for friends and family as well.
I think That's a very good thing. I wish that had been in place back when I had this problem, because I didn't feel like I could share it with anybody. And I would have liked to talk to somebody about it. When it finally came out, well, first of all, the number one key to tells you that it is a scam is when they ask for money. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, that's the number one thing, and I think that a lot of scammers have started to realize now that that's where people realize that maybe something's not right, and that's why we see sometimes these scams taking longer and longer to actually get to the point of them asking for money, because they've started to realize actually we need to build that trust more. So they've become even more kind of invasive of people and taking a lot more time to actually begin asking for funds.
Could it be more than one person talking to you on the other end of that line, or on the chat, or whatever you?
Totally. I think there's two real types of romance scammers. There's more, but separate them into two categories. There's individuals who could be anybody, just somebody online trying their luck. But there's also these kind of organized crime groups that take place in romance scams as well. I think one of the really interesting things that we've seen across the last few years have been with sextortion crimes in particular, which is where particularly happening against young boys, but men as well and women, where there's somebody on the other end of a call, and they're encouraging them to take their clothes off so they can screenshot it, and then we'll blackmail them. If you don't give me money, I'm going to leak these pictures. But what we've seen there is actually a lot of the women that are being used in the video calls are being trafficked themselves. So we're also part of a crime, and are also a victim of a crime. And there's somebody behind them making them do all of these things in order to extort money. They're not actually seeing any of it themselves. So we are seeing that this is something that organised crime groups are taking part in, on top of many other types of scams and crimes that they're committing. Romance fraud, sextortion is just another layer for them.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I was on and off the dating sites for about 6 years, and so when this first happened to me, they would ask for money or something. One guy wanted me to get some Verizon phones for his kids, and things like that. And they said, "Well, I'm not asking for money." I said, "I have to spend money to get that to you." but the one fella wanted me to. He was borrowing the money. He was in China. He was borrowing money, but he had an inheritance in like the Netherlands, and he would have that box of gold bars shipped to me, and I was to take out whatever amount of money I had sent to him for myself, and then the rest of them, when he got back home, he would get it. Now, that was very tricky to me. Number one, I'd have to tell him where I was living, and I didn't think that was a very good idea. But could that have led to something else bigger and gotten me involved in crime?
Yeah, I mean, it's something we're seeing more and more of where people who are providing their address, personal details, are then getting harassed and stalked themselves by cyber criminals and scammers. So it's escalating beyond the fraud and taking funds from them. It's actually leading to kind of these more potentially violent crimes and crimes that make people fearful for their lives. But like you said, on the other side of that, we also have incidents where people are being used to export money through. So they might have come across funds illegally and are using this person as kind of a waypoint to make it harder for police to track where the funds are coming from. So it's kind of like, they call it pig butchering, and that's the kind of the key word for it at the moment. But there's lots of other types of it as well, where people are essentially being used as a waypoint for funds before it reaches the final destination.
Well, that I think that I was smart enough to realize that there were several of them wanting to send a gift or wanting my address, and if they have your email address, if they have your home address, they can find out a lot about you just from knowing just a couple of things about you, can't they? I mean, how easy.
Yeah, and it's really interesting actually, because in the industry we call it open source intelligence. So it's this idea that we can find almost anything within the public domain. So if we just have the name and surname of somebody, it's really easy for us to figure out more information about where they live, where their kids go to school, what their daily routine is like. There's so much that you can find on one person just by Googling, by knowing all the right tricks to do it. And actually, this is exactly what a lot of scammers do, is that they're finding information about you so that when they do have that conversation, they can see on your Facebook page, oh, you have a daughter that's 8 years old, and they can say, oh, I've got a daughter that's 8 years old as well. So there's some sort of attachment point there.
Yeah. They're very, very tricky, very
Oh.
good to get you to talk about things that you've got to watch everything.
Definitely.
Last week, and I don't know, last week I got 3 emails from somebody. I don't even know who it is, but they have my telephone number, and they said we could have this conversation on the phone instead of an email. But we're doing it this way. What do you think? And then it was going into that they had managed to hack into my computer, and that know that I had watched porn sites, which I never have. That was my clue that it was a mess. But it went on and on. It was really scary, and I knew that this was a scam. And then I got the second, and the third. But what should I do when I get something like that in my email or?
Yeah. It's a really good question, and I think that one that you've mentioned is a really common one that I think gets everybody a bit worried when you first see it, because it includes some sort of bit of personal information a lot of the time, your phone number that they found online, or for some people it might be a password that's been exposed because it's been a part of a data breach. So the kind of thing that they'll say is, your password's been in a data breach, I know what your password is, and they'll actually type that out. So it's terrifying, and what you should do about that is really, I think, like I said, if something doesn't feel right, trust your gut. It probably isn't, and don't take any steps straight away. The thing with scammers is that they want you to take action now, and everything that they'll say in emails, texts, calls will always be something that makes you want to take action right now, and putting that pressure on. So take a step back from it. Call your bank, the police, whoever they've kind of pretended to imitate, and just ask for confirmation that it is from them. If they're not pretending to be someone, then equally give the police a call and just see, because most of the time it will be a scam that they've come across before, and they can help and talk you through whether it's legitimate or not.
So what advice would you give someone who received a questionable email? I mean, as far number one, I think of right away is don't click on any links live in that email. Should I block it, that number? Should I let somebody know that this happened, or should I just delete it and forget it?
Yeah, I think like you said, don't click any links. If you haven't already opened it and you know it's a scam email, just don't open it. And then it really depends on what you want to do with that. If you want to delete them and block them, you absolutely can. Although if it is part of more of a kind of harassment campaign and they're messaging you constantly, we would recommend that you don't block them, because that can lead to you losing evidence. But if it is just a one-off, then you can absolutely do that. But you can also forward the email on to a provider. So in the US, and I'm just going to try and remember what the email is, but there is an email address you can send phishing emails to in the US. and they will investigate it further. And that's as part of, I think it's the IC3 that provide that. So if you go on their website, they'll tell you who you need to forward that email to, and they'll put it in a bank for them to investigate.
So you can send that to that
Yes.
IC3 as well as call them about it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
and that's great because it just allows them to add it to their intelligence database. So whilst they might not take any action on it then and there, they can collate it with other emails and see if there's any trends that they're seeing.
Okay, there was a question, something I think, how can we protect our Rebel? Could you put that one back up? We were talking about
Why do people so willingly give up their information these days?
okay.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's not necessarily people giving it up willingly. I think people aren't aware of the repercussions a lot of the time. So you might even not realize that you're sharing information. It might be a matter of you've shared something on social media and you think only your friends and family can see it, but maybe your profile's set to open without realizing it. I think the onus really needs to be on companies themselves and regulators to say, hey, like, let's put these settings on by default instead of somebody having to go into their settings, change everything to private, choose what they want to share. But unfortunately, right now, that's not the way. They want to collect as much data as possible, of course. So everything is very much in the open.
Is there any way to, check it out before, if it's a correct website and they're wanting your social security number? I mean, I'm almost afraid to fill out an application online anymore.
Yeah, totally. And it's really difficult because sometimes when you're searching for legitimate websites, the first websites that come up aren't always the real one. And the best thing to do is to, if it's your bank, for example, on the back of your card, you'll usually have a phone number that you can call and just confirm the right website with them. Or they might even have the website address written on the back of the card. If it's another organisation you've had letters from, the same thing, that information might be on those. But otherwise, it's just a matter of being really vigilant of the websites that you're looking at. A lot of people talk about the padlock that you often see in your search bar. And if that's green, it means the website's safe. That's not necessarily true. It means the website has certificates attached to it, which can be bought online really cheap. So it is an indicator, but it's not a be all or end all. So the best thing to do is just make sure that every time you're searching something that the link looks legitimate. It's got the whole company's name in there. It's not got capital L's instead, or capital I's instead of L's. Those sorts of things that make it look like it's legitimate when it's really not. But the key thing to do is if you can contact them in person, or you have an official letter with their number and website address on, then use it that way.
Do they still have like a bucket list of those who have paid, have been scammed before? And because I just get an awful lot of emails and things that I know are questionable. And
oh yeah, totally. So, they definitely do. And I think, like you said, if you've been scammed before, the chances are you're going to be on a list that they're going to keep contacting you. One of the things we've seen as part of that as well is that they'll wait about a week if they think that somebody's figured out that it's a scam, and then call them pretending to be from the police department because they assume that they've probably reported it, and start asking for money to investigate the crime or for a deposit for something. The law enforcement are never going to ask for that, but that is one strategy that we've seen as well, is now they're kind of assuming, okay, they're going to report this, so let's take advantage of that too.
I just read about one this morning. They're trying to get people to send gifts to other people, like a company, and we'll send that it has a catalog and of items that you could choose, flowers or candy or whatever, and then you choose the person. And I'm not quite sure how that works. Is that just to get other names, or when they send the gift of the person receiving the gift, it becomes vulnerable, right?
Yeah, I'd have to look into that. I've not seen that one yet, but we did have something that was, I guess, kind of similar. In the UK, we have a TV show called Scam Interceptors, where, like the name, they try to intercept scams. And there was a interesting one they uncovered on there, which involved a whole company really pretending to be a O2, which is a big mobile provider over here. And they were hacking into people's O2 accounts and sending phones to people's addresses. But they would then arrange for somebody that worked for their company to go and pick that phone up for them and tell them, oh, it was a mistake. It wasn't meant to be sent to you. So they were intercepting that way. And the people that were scamming you nonetheless, because they just assumed that this was somebody that worked for O2 coming to retrieve their goods, but it was actually a fraudster. So really interesting how there was that crossover between them hacking into the accounts and then it going into the physical world with somebody actually turning up at their door.
I'm just literally amazed at all of these things that if they would put their minds on solving cancer or doing something good for the world, what a nice world we would have, instead of all of this trying to hurt other people, trying to steal their money or in an easy way rather than working for it. I don't know. It's just very scary.
Yeah, so, it's so true.
What brought you to this line of work?
So I'd been working in skincare actually for most of my life. So I was doing skincare. I worked for a skincare brand and did facials and all of that stuff. So it was very random. But I then decided I needed to move on to something else. And very early on into studying policing and criminal justice, I found out that actually, firstly, I couldn't join the police because I found out I had hypermobility, which was a medical condition that stopped me from joining. But secondly, I found out that I'd been being stalked covertly for the last kind of 6 years. So from the time I was around 14 onwards to my 20s. And I had no clue that this was happening until someone sent me a message and said, hey, this guy is posting pictures of you online, just random pictures that he'd taken from my Instagram. And quickly it all started to unravel and figured out this guy had been stalking me for quite a while. And reporting to the police in the UK, I just realised they had no clue what to do. They sent an officer around to my house who was asking me all sorts of questions about, well, what is Reddit and how does this work and how does that work? And so the last thing I wanted to do was, as a 20-year-old, sit there and explain how technology works to this police officer. So yeah, just very quickly realised the gap in support and unfortunately the lack of knowledge within law enforcement of technology. And rightly so in many ways, because they've got so much to know about. But there just wasn't that support system for somebody to really understand the technical stuff behind what was happening to them. So right as I figured that out, the Cyber Helpline actually launched in the UK at the time. It was just a couple of people. I was the third person on board, I think. And we've been growing ever since. So we're now kind of 150 plus volunteers. And yeah, it's been a really interesting journey, but never a line of work I thought I'd end up in.
Okay, so let's talk about this impact. It's not just financial loss. In fact, I felt the whole process was much worse emotionally, because you had a couple different standpoints of losing the love of your life, or you think it is, and then the humiliation of having made such a whopper of a mistake and talked to this person for so long. What have you found to be the emotional effects of victims?
I think that cybercrime is often thought of as a financial crime. And I think when we look at it that way, we forget about the real kind of violent impacts it often has on people. Like you said, that emotional impact, especially with romance fraud. You've been talking to somebody for however long, you think it's somebody that you're in love with and they're in love with you. And then not only do you find out that they're after money from you, but that they don't actually exist in the sense that you thought they did, because it's potentially someone pretending to be someone else. And I think that that's really important to remember, is like, exactly like you said, every single person that comes to us completes a form which asks them to rate different areas of the impact that cybercrime have had on them. And financial is 9 times out of 10, even if somebody's lost hundreds of thousands of dollars, it's bottom of the list. They aren't worried about getting their money back, but they are scared often for their physical safety. Is this person going to turn up at my house? Because I don't know where they actually live. I don't know who they really are. They're emotionally scared. They're scared to tell their friends and family about it. They feel humiliated and feel alone in it. And just their, the mental health deteriorates. And it's a lack of understanding as well about, why has this happened to me, and how could this happen to me? That has a massive impact on people. So I think we as a society, we think about financial as being the biggest part, but we think we need to forget about that. I mean, not forget about it, obviously it's a big part, but we need to start thinking on the mental health, the physical safety, the impact that it has on friends and family and those around the person. It extends much more beyond just that financial impact, which, like I said, could be a massive part, but for most people, that's the bit that has the least impact on them.
That I had hoped not to tell anybody. I wasn't going to tell anybody that I had sent this money to this person, and because I'm not going to do that. My daughter, oh, you'll get scammed, Mom, if you go on a dating site. Oh yeah, and so I knew going into it there was some problems, but I didn't realize it was a big thing. And now it is more than just a big thing. I read $10 billion was lost to fraud, technical fraud. Is that what they call it?
Yes.
In the last year. I mean, back when I decided to write my book about it, it was $145,000, I believe. I'm kind of forgetting here. $145 million had been lost. I mean, that's a big difference between 145 million 7 years ago and $10.5 billion in 23. That's 6 years.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think that the problem is that people think it will never happen to them. I think that we've focused for so long on what does a scam look like, that actually we're still showing people, when we do, I mean, people have training at work, what does a phishing email look like? And it's still the symptoms we're telling people about are, oh, it will have spelling errors, it will come from an email address that doesn't make sense. It's like it will look like a scam. But scams don't really look like scams nowadays, not for the most part. These are people that are putting their lives into scamming people, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. They are using AI potentially to generate text that they can use in the messages they're sending people. They're having full-on conversations with people day and night. There's a lot of work that goes into it. So the problem is that we've not adapted the training we're providing people with in how to recognize scams to the modern day. We're still telling people, oh, you'll know it's a scam when you see it, which just isn't the case. It can really happen to anybody, and all it takes is wrong time, wrong place.
And they've, even though I was I was 99% sure it was a scam. They found my weak spot.
Mm.
You know, I'm a Christian and I'm supposed to help people in need, right? And they, I refused for it was at least 10 days. I kept saying no, and I don't have it. And then but this thing about had his money stolen when he was in China. He was a businessman and he'd been beaten up and he was starving to death. Well, that was the thing that got me starving to death. Could I let this man, so I sent some money, not what he asked. He
Mm.
asked for $20,000 so he could get home. And at the time, how much does it cost to fly to United Kingdom from the United
It
States?
only cost me about £1,000. It's not too expensive.
£1,000 is about what in the US dollar?
Like $1,200, maybe $1,500.
Okay, so 20,000,
Yeah.
But of course, I didn't send that. But then he was mad because I didn't send the whole thing and wanted to me to send more. And that's it. All that story's in my book, Learning to Dance in the Rain, Surviving Grief, Internet Dating, and Romance Scams. And the reason I guess I agreed to start this podcast when I was asked to do it was that I wanted to tell people, let them know that there is life after being victimized. It is a difficult time to go through, especially when your family is very upset when they find out about it. What could you give advice to you to help your family understand? Is that something we could?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's really interesting because some of the time when we get these cases come at the Cyber Helpline, it is friends and family that are contacting us and saying, actually, I'm concerned about my mum, my dad, whoever it is. But I think the hard part is for somebody that's realised it's happened and they've got to tell their friends and family, it's that constant thought process of what are they going to think of me? And I think the important part is to have that conversation with them of, look, this could happen to anybody, provide them with resources that can help them to understand that as well. Because it can be hard. Like I said, we've been fed all of this information for so long that you'll know a scam when you see it, but it's not true. And I think that if friends and family still have that mindset, it's going to be really hard for them to accept. So I think just providing them with information, looking at the number of people that experience romance scams every year and saying to them, look, there's these millions of people that have also experienced this. And that's just the ones that have reported it. I think having those conversations is really important to just try and help them get out of the mindset of this shouldn't have happened. Actually, it shouldn't have happened because the scammer shouldn't have done it in the first place. What you've done is nothing wrong. And it's just having to help them to understand and accept that. And most family and friends are really supportive. We've found most completely get it. Of course, they're upset, but getting them to direct that upset towards the scammer is the key part, and really helping them to understand how this situation happened in the first place.
But when you're the victim and you are very confused and upset yourself, it's very difficult to have a reasonable conversation.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's where even when here in the UK, I'm not sure how it is in the US, but I imagine it might be similar. The police are usually happy to have that conversation on the person's behalf with friends and family. And again, that's something that we would be happy to do as well.
And my family, they don't want to even talk about it anymore. But I know that it's an elephant in the room 7 years later.
And that's it. It's such a big part of your life as well, unfortunately. But using it like doing the radio show and your book and getting the word out there, I think it's turning that around and taking the power back to use it to help other people is incredible. And I think it is an important thing to talk about because, like I said, it could happen to anybody. And the more people that speak out about it, the less likely that is to happen to somebody else.
And even if you know that this is going on, you still, it's just how they kind of trying to win your trust, I guess. And if a person's lonely, and somebody is there to talk to them, give them some attention, it's very hard to say no. That not to get involved in it. It just really is.
Totally.
One of the do you have? Well, is the Cyber Helpline where you would advise people to start if they have questions about, is this a scam, do you think, or
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some really great resources out there. I mean, on our website, we have a chatbot that anybody can use. All you do with that is type in your kind of what's happened to you, and it will provide you with information that it thinks is relevant, and it will probably direct you to the catfishing or romance scams pages, which has a checklist in there of what to do if you think it's a crime, and also how can you notice it's a crime in the first place. But equally, websites like IC3 have some really great resources on there as well that come direct from law enforcement.
Okay, now how could someone get in touch with that, or what would you type in to talk?
Yeah, so if you go to the cyberhelpline.com, we'll pop right up. There's a big button that says get help, and as soon as you click on that, our chatbot will come up. And that will generally, it resolves around 80% of cases, but of course, people want to speak to a human. So if the chatbot doesn't resolve your issue, then you'll be given that option to speak to one of our volunteers.
Okay, all right. And so you are traveling around giving your information to police departments. Are they receptive?
Yeah, do you know what? It's been great in the US. When we first launched in the UK, I think people were a little bit iffy about us of why do these cybersecurity people want to do something for free that they could be charging thousands for? And it's like, well, we just want to be nice. So they were a bit iffy to start with, but they came around and we've got support from police forces all over the UK now. But entering into the US has been great, actually. We've had police forces approaching us and asking questions of what should I do? Rather than us having to approach them and say you should be doing this better. So they're coming to us directly and they do really want to learn. So the US has been a really interesting place for us to launch in and see how willing people are to learn and how much they want to make a change. Because
I've heard, well, when I reported that incident, it was, well, we're sorry this happened to you. You won't ever get your money back, but they wrote a report. When I got a death threat a couple years ago, it was just, it's a scam, Shelby. Don't worry about it. The police officer was supposed to come to my house and interview me. I didn't even get a call from him. I don't even know if they wrote that one up at all.
Yeah, and unfortunately that is sometimes the case. It's the same here in the UK as well. It can vary depending on who you speak to. Generally we found the US to be a little bit better, but obviously that depends on people's own experiences. But one of the great things that we can do at the Cyber Helpline we've found has a real impact is speaking to the force that's dealing with the incident and saying to them, hey, you've got this case, but you're not doing anything with it. This is what we would recommend you do. So providing that little bit of advocacy and being a touch point for law enforcement to actually speak to us, because like I said, they can't know everything. So if they're stuck on something, that's what we're here for as well. It's not just to help victims and survivors of cybercrime, but to provide the police with somewhere that they can go to as well.
Now, one of the questions that you wrote here was, what's the difference between proactive and reactive work, and how do they overlap? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I think it's there's some really great agencies out there that are doing awesome stuff on how can we be proactive about how we tackle cybercrime. So looking at how do we prevent it from happening in the first place. And I think that unfortunately that's where often the system lets us down, is that you provide this preventative work, but actually when something does happen to you, that leads individuals to feel more guilty about it, because it's like, well, I should have followed the advice that I was given by my school, by my work, whoever it is. There's no real support for the aftercare of what happens after cybercrime happens. And that's where we step in. But I think there's a lot more work to do around that, of how do we ensure that, okay, we're doing great stuff for preventing cybercrime, but what do we do to provide that aftercare for people?
So that's basically what we're trying to help, is get support for the victims after this has happened to them.
Yeah, totally. I think it's a really important piece.
Yeah, that it really is, because like I said, it's still the elephant in the room, no matter what. With my friends, they seem to be, receptive. But boy, oh boy, the family's a good one. Okay, we're just about out of time, and I want to thank you again for coming and sharing your expertise. I learned a lot, even though I thought I knew it. And to my audience, I thank you for listening, and I hope that you have learned something from this, and it will help you to become resilient so that you can bounce back when something bad happens to you. There is a life afterwards. This is Shelby Wagner signing off, and I'll see you next week. Same place, same station. Bye now. Appreciate the